Hello, my fellow Idahoans. This video is a response to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and his recent videos about why we should support his idea of an Article 5 term limits convention. I realize that Ron DeSantis has been America's favorite since Trump. I also know that people enjoy the position that he's taking, and I also know in its human nature, or Americans, or because of our awful situation, we're looking for a king wherever we can find one. If one remotely fits into the box that we would consider king, we're going to go ahead and call him king, and we're going to support him no matter what he says. We did that with Trump, because some of the positions, as you know, afterwards were not correct. What I'm seeing now is the same with Governor Ron DeSantis. Sure, is he a liberty guy? Is he shaking things up? He sure is. But there's a few things that I want to be able to take the opportunity, since he's now come from Florida to Idaho, to be able to try to get you to support an Article 5 convention, which I adamantly oppose. You can support an Article 5, you can support balanced budget amendment, you can support term limits, but you know what? We have a decision on whether we want to be wrong or not, too. And so when you want to go down this road and you're going to entrust yourself to another idol that yet will lead you astray, we need to really scrutinize and understand what people are saying, rather than just supporting them without understanding the position that they're supporting. Now, I'm not going to make this in 30 seconds like he did. Perhaps I could, but I think that you're entitled to a little bit more respect than that. I'm not going to give you fear-mongering, and I'm not going to scare you, and I'm not going to tell you, we can't just do anything, even though that's what you want to hear. Because haste has always made waste. Anytime anything has been made in a decision that sounds good, it usually never is. And yet somehow it escapes the minds of my fellow Americans on what that is. So for the sake of my rebuttal, as short as I can be, number one is there's no such thing as a term limits convention. You don't need to go any farther than Article 5 of our Constitution to realize that it cannot be held to a single topic. Nor in Article 5 does it say that you can specifically have a term limits convention, a balanced budget convention, or any other convention. Because Article 5 calls for the convention to be called to propose amendments. Now, what I talked about last night was it's not within the state purview to have a single issue. They don't have the opportunity to do that. They can either call for the state's application to an Article 5 convention, but they can't limit the convention, because the convention is a standalone autonomous body outside of the legislature, as our founders had openly said. Ron DeSantis also said that term limits is the only way to drain the swamp in D.C. That's a lot like what I recall, if I remember correctly, what Mark Meckler and the Convention of States said when they said the only way to do it is to be able to have an Article 5 convention to rein in an out-of-control government. Ladies and gentlemen, they're lying to you. And you need to look no further than to be able to understand the root cause of the issue. Is the problem the Constitution? Or is there a defect in the Constitution? Or is it the lack of the politicians' adherence to their oath to the Constitution? Because maybe they're not being held accountable by their constituents, or maybe they are. It is not the only way to drain the swamp. It would seem that way. Oh, yeah, it's really bad. We've got the deep state cabal and we're going to do that. But you know what? If the founders said that we have the government we deserve, then what kind of government do we deserve when the congressional average scorecard percentage of the adherence to the Constitution is 34% nationwide? And furthermore, why would we take the pathetic voter percentages that we have in average states and things of that nature and think somehow, oh, it's just fraud? Hey, look, I'm not saying there's not fraud. I'm saying that there is for sure. I mean, I totally believe that. But don't you think that we should probably, in order to make that case, don't you think that we should raise the percentage of voters, number one, but educated voters, number two, to be able to understand what they're voting for? We're not doing that. We speak in our own little echo chamber like I am right now, probably right, where I'm just restricted to the same 5 people. But we're not openly talking about this issue and having the dialogue and having people do it. Now listen, I had a meeting and a guy, after listening to 25 minutes of what I had to say, said, well, we can't just do nothing. And then I'm called a fearmonger. Now, I would suggest if somebody said, well, we can't just do nothing. I'm not the fearmonger. The people that say that are the fearmongers. What kind of weird, matrixical, dystopian world am I living in when I can completely decimate an entire argument and the only answer people have is, well, we just might as well just blow up the Constitution. When the Constitution isn't the problem. It's like, well, Christians aren't reading the Bible. Should we maybe rewrite it? I mean, let's think about that. Let's be consistent in our arguments, shall we? Can we at least do that? So first of all, it's not the only way to drain the swamp in D.C. The best way to do it is to be able to start educating people and to prevent people from continuing to go down that dark hole that got us here in the first place. We didn't get here for any other reason other than the fact that we became ignorant and we allowed the politicians to be able to do what they want to do. The fact that we're here and people said, oh, I don't even know what to do. It's like all of a sudden you know that there's a timeline that all of a sudden the freight train just stops at the end of the line. The freight train doesn't stop. By all means, we need to be able to get on that freight train and we need to accelerate that freight train until we start making the changes we want to make. If you think to open this thing up to an Article 5 convention, to allow the convention to be able to do amendments, it shows the lack of understanding that you have about this issue. It's a basic issue. I went through it last night in the basics. What Congress's duty is, what the state's duty is, what the convention's duty is. And you know the other thing to consider, you guys, if you think that Ron DeSantis is your hero, then why is he lying to you? He's either intentional, and he might be making good money because they make pretty good money to be spokesmen advocating for an Article 5 convention. But what would that mean if you actually decided that you wanted him as a president or a vice president? If he's that easily swayed by special interest, which is exactly what Madison warned us about people advocating for a convention. He says that he needs states to take action to pass a resolution in calling for a term limits convention. The whole thing is a lie. Either he knows it or he doesn't know it and he's being played as an idiot. And if he's being played as an idiot, then he can be played as a governor, he can be played as a president, and you guys ought to be worried about exactly where he's going with this. So Ron, I don't know if you know this or not. I would only hope that eventually you get my video and to be able to discuss this issue in detail. And hopefully you have the humility to capitulate and realize that you were wrong like Glenn Beck was. Ron DeSantis, you're wrong on this. This is not the only way to drain the swamp in D.C. And I detest the fact that you sold it down the line to my fellow Idahoans as if you were telling the truth. And I also detest the fact that you're telling people that they can call a term limits an Article 5 term limits convention when there's no such thing. I appreciate you guys listening to me. I hope what you're taking to heart and understand. I'm not being paid by special interest for this message, but I am Tom Munns and I approve this one. Thanks.